Discover the 7 incredible survival skills that transform frontiersmen into thriving legends. Hank never felt like a legend. At 28, chained to his family's failing legacy, each day drifted aimlessly amidst the dusty shelves of the hardware store, the gleam of adventure dulled by the grind of reality. What once were tools for exploration now felt like shackles displaying his faults. He watched others escape, while he remained, a mere clerk labeled by a lineage that weighed heavily on him like a millstone. Thoughts raced in his mind. Am I destined to fade into obscurity, just another cog in the family cycle of poverty? The store closed, shadows stretching through the narrow aisles. He dusted off a spade as a wave of anxiety gripped him. Each clatter of wood felt like a ticking clock, counting down his aspirations. The repeated motions of unfulfilling tasks echoing the desperation anchoring his soul. Torn between loyalty to his family and a yearning to forge his own path, Hank felt suffocated by expectations that loomed over him like the mist that crept through the mountains. Suddenly, a crack of thunder jolted him from his thoughts. Rain began to pelt the cabin, an unrelenting tempest that mirrored his inner turmoil. What if old Jim needed help? The thought was a spark, igniting something deep within. Before he could think rationally, adrenaline surged through him. Was courage a fleeting moment? He sprang into the night, battling the storm that thundered down around him, the wind howling like inner demons clawing for his attention. Drenched and breathless, Hank stumbled to Jim's cabin, pulse racing as he knocked frantically at the door. Jim's frail voice carried through the storm. At last, the door creaked open, revealing the wise old man, his weathered face alive with surprise. "Hank, what brings you out on a night like this?" "What if you needed help?" Hank said, half defensive, half apologetic. But even through the wild chaos of winds, he felt a flicker of warmth from the raw human connection that swelled in the depths of his heart. This spontaneous act of bravery ignited an unlikely friendship. Jim took Hank under his wing, revealing not just 7 wilderness skills, but lessons woven in resilience and the spirit of nature. As the months rolled on, each skill unveiled opened new worlds to him. Tracking animals, identifying plants, his hands grew steadier, but his mind spun in turmoil. With each lesson, he delved deeper into the tension that gripped his heart. He rose with the dawn, hungry to claim a life beyond the hardware store. Yet, as his skill improved, shadowy truths surfaced. Insidious whispers about his family's past emerged, tainted with injustice and the failures of ancestors who chose comfort over truth. Anguish clawed at him. Were his ambitions tainted by carrying the burden of generations? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Confronting the family legacy was like standing on the precipice, the storm of understanding crashing around him. Hank's heart raced as he pondered the choice looming like a dark cloud, to expose the reality of their past or honor a false family narrative. Caught in life's cruel paradox, desperation birthed questions of self-worth that spiraled through every corner of his being. The mountains loomed ominously outside his window, their shadows whispering secrets meant to be unspooled. A figure from the past would soon emerge, claiming to hold the key to truths that could unravel everything. As Hank prepared to confront not just the legacy of his family, but the destiny of his very soul, he sensed the storm of his choices brewing once more. Would he embrace the brutality of truth or retreat into safety's facade? As the first light of dawn broke, it sifted through Hank's cluttered thoughts like rays piercing a dense fog. He had lain awake, wrestling with the choices before him, haunted by dreams where silhouettes of his ancestors stood at the edge of a cliff, urging him to leap into the unknown. He had awakened with a resolve ignited. Today, he would seek answers. After his usual chore of opening the store, Hank locked the door behind him and set off into the thick curvature of the forest. Each step crunched underfoot, the leaves whispering secrets of stories long tucked away beneath centuries of soil. He grasped the intricacies of nature that Jim had painstakingly taught him, which provided both guidance and distraction from the turmoil within. Who was he, really, without the weight of family and tradition? Hours passed as he meandered through the woods, brushing against bramble and falling across patches of soft moss. His instincts sharpened. He felt the pulse of the land in a profound way, but the unease shadowing him stifled the beauty that surrounded him. He exited the thicket into a clearing, a small creek cascading through the rocks. Its soothing babble contrasted with the tempest of his heart. Just as he knelt to sip the cold, refreshing water, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a man Hank recognized too well, a connection steeped in an uncomfortable past. His Uncle Henry, an embodiment of their family's lineage, stood there with a glare as sharp as the edge of a harrowing truth. "Hank," Henry greeted, his voice laced with authority and disappointment, "what are you doing out here, neglecting your responsibilities? Your place is in the store, not gallivanting with dreams of the wild." The familiar pressure clamped around Hank's chest. This was what he feared, the relentless tug of familial duty anchoring him to a legacy he didn't choose. "Maybe that's my problem, Uncle. I feel trapped," he said, the words escaping in a rush, raw and unrefined. "I'm seeking more than just what our family was." Henry narrowed his eyes, defense surging. "You think running from the family name is the answer? You think I didn't want more when I was your age? But some sacrifices are necessary. You wouldn't understand." Anger mixed with hurt bubbled within Hank. Each sentence felt like a tether, dragging him back into a past he fought hard to escape. "I've come too far to go back down that road. What we've built is a prison, Uncle, not a legacy. If we don't confront our history, we're doomed to repeat it." A silence descended, thick and suffocating, as the tension crackled like static in the air. Henry's face softened, though the hardness never fully faded. "You think knowing the past will change anything? Your grandfather made choices for a reason," he said, his tone shifting from offense to caution. "Exactly. Choices made out of fear, not wisdom. I want to understand the darkness that clings to our family, even if it shatters the illusion." The confrontation surged through Hank, each word imbued with newfound determination. For too long, he had accepted narratives that suffocated him. As Uncle Henry turned away, anger rippling through him like the currents of the creek behind them, Hank felt a rush of clarity. He needed to dig deeper, unearth the truths buried beneath years of familial deceit. This wasn't merely about survival skills or adventure. This was about liberating himself from a cycle that threatened to ensnare him forever. He had to talk to Jim, understand the stories before they vanished like echoes in the mountains. There was a journey waiting, one full of unsettling revelations and necessity. He carved a path through the woods, purpose igniting every step as he contemplated how to dismantle the very fabric of his inheritance. What Hank would discover next wasn't just about his family. It was about the essence of who he could become when he reclaimed the narrative of his own existence, an existence nourished by truth rather than haunted by myth. As he made his way back, resolve swelled in his chest, with each toe pressing into the earth beneath him, possibility edging ever closer. Arriving at Jim's cabin, a thought ignited in his mind. The secrets he sought could forge a new identity entirely. But would he be ready for what came next? Would he find the courage to embrace more than just a change, but a transformation? The worn path leading to Jim's cabin felt different, almost charged with possibility. As Hank approached, the familiar scent of pine and freshly turned earth filled his lungs, grounding him in his mission. Today was not just another visit. It was the beginning of a profound journey, one that promised to peel away layers of inherited pain and reveal a stronger core beneath. Jim was already outside, chopping wood with focused precision. His movements were deliberate and strong, showcasing a mastery that Hank had always admired. This was more than just sustenance for the fire. It was a manifestation of Jim's connection to the land, something Hank yearned to unlock for himself. As Jim noticed Hank's presence, a warm smile broke the stoic demeanor. "Good to see you, Hank. What brings you back so soon?" Jim paused, wiping sweat from his brow, his voice a steady anchor in Hank's swirling thoughts. "I need to learn," Hank said, the words escaping more emphatically than he intended. "Not just skills or the land, but the stories hidden within it, the lives of those who came before us." Jim regarded him with a knowing expression, recognizing the weight behind Hank's words. "You're not just looking for survival skills, are you? You're searching for deeper truths." "Exactly," Hank replied, feeling a rush of validation. "I need to confront our family's history. If I don't understand it, I won't break free from it." "What do you want to know?" Jim's eyes sparkled with curiosity, urging Hank deeper into his thoughts. Hank hesitated, understanding the gravity of Jim's question. "Everything. Stories of hardship, important choices, the moments where strength came from facing darkness rather than running from it. I want to know how I can reshape that into something empowering." Jim nodded, his demeanor shifting as he understood the crossroads at which Hank stood. "Then we'll start by talking about survival, real survival. Not just the physical, but the emotional and mental resilience." The words hung in the air, settling like a soft mist around them. "Show me," Hank urged, his mind racing with what this could mean, what it could unlock within him. With a kind smile, Jim gathered a few essentials from his cabin, the tools for crafting basic shelters, understanding edible plants, tracking animals. "We'll begin with the land. Every tree, every rock has a story. I will teach you how to listen." The hours drifted by as Hank absorbed Jim's teachings like a sponge. With each lesson about the intricacies of the forest, he started to dismantle the blocks of fear residing in him. With every piece of knowledge, he transformed disillusionment into understanding, isolation into connection. He learned how to identify wild herbs that healed and navigate the trails that whispered tales of resilience, survival, and family ties. Yet, beneath the rhythm of learning, an insistent whisper persisted within Hank. A nagging question loomed larger with each passing moment. Could he truly challenge the legacy his family forged? Was he ready to face not just the stories of those who came before him, but the repercussions of unraveling them? As the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky a canvas of orange and purple, Hank felt the weight of expectation. With each answered question, a new one emerged, demanding his attention. He hadn't expected insight to prove as burdensome as it was enlightening. Would learning this pivotal knowledge fortify him, or would it expose fissures he wasn't yet ready to confront? With determination coursing through him, Hank glanced towards the horizon. Uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud. The more he delved into these truths, the sharper the edges of his fate appeared, reflecting a reality he could hardly bear. Just as they finished for the day, Jim turned to Hank with a slight frown, sensing his internal battle. The day you confront that legacy is the day you will truly begin your journey, Hank. But are you ready to embrace the discomfort of revelation? Hank inhaled sharply, contemplating Jim's words. The prospect of a profound shift swirled in his gut. The answers he craved loomed dangerously close, yet still felt agonizingly out of reach. What lay on the other side of these hidden truths? Would they transform him into the hero of his own story, or mar him with the weight of burdens he hadn't anticipated? Hesitation lingered in the quiet forest, foreshadowing a challenge that awaited him. As darkness fell, Hank felt unease settle in his chest, a reminder that courage often walked hand in hand with fear. He realized he was on the brink of something monumental, but would he take the final leap? Would he be prepared for the truth? As dawn broke, ambitious sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a luminous glow that made the forest appear alive. Hank awoke in his sleeping bag, the stillness enveloping him like a warm embrace. Yet inside, the tumult of his thoughts surged. Today, he would embark on a deeper exploration, a dive into the truths he'd been so anxious to confront. He needed to unlock not just external survival skills, but those that dwelled in the recesses of his mind and heart. Jim was already outside, stretching and preparing for the day ahead. "Ready to dive deeper?" he asked, his tone gentle but charged with unspoken anticipation. Hank nodded, his heart pounding. The kitchen table became their classroom, littered with sketches, maps, and books laden with wisdom. What started as survival techniques gradually morphed into stories of struggles and victories, an unfolding legacy that Hank realized he was now a part of. Survival isn't just about gathering food or building a shelter, Jim explained, poring over a faded map of the land they traversed. It's about resilience in the face of adversity. It's how we handle pain and uncertainty. Each word carved out a part of the fog that had shrouded Hank's mind, allowing clarity to seep in. Here was a concept he could grasp. "Tell me more," Hank pushed, desperate to unearth the layers that lay hidden beneath. Jim began to recount tales of the ancestors who settled this land, those who had not only survived but thrived against all odds. He spoke candidly about the struggles with isolation, the heartbreak of loss, and the bittersweet triumphs that forged their spirits. As Hank listened, each story felt like a mirror reflecting parts of his own life, the echoes of doubt and fear within him beginning to resonate with that fierce legacy of survival. Yet, nestled in the shadows of those compelling narratives was a darker truth, one that challenged Hank's understanding of resilience. "Sometimes," Jim said, almost as an afterthought, "survival means leaving behind what no longer serves you." The statement lingered in the air, wrapping around Hank like a cold shroud. What was he holding on to that he needed to let go of? With each lesson, he discovered a skill that shocked him, a burgeoning ability to process his feelings and confront the legacy that had been woven so tightly into his identity. He learned to recognize edible plants that sustained the body, while simultaneously untangling the emotional weeds that suffocated his spirit. As they ventured into deeper parts of the forest, Jim introduced tasks that challenged his mind as much as his body. Navigating by the stars, understanding animal behavior, tracking with precision. Each task required focus, a sharpening of his instincts. "Look around, Hank. This woodland thrives because it adapts. It bends but doesn't break," Jim instructed, pointing to a tree leaning yet still standing, its roots gripping the earth tenaciously. "You must learn to do the same. Adapt or get lost in the forest of your family's past." The analogy struck hard, reverberating through Hank's consciousness. With each passing moment, the internal conflict mounted. The stories unveiled painful truths, and with them came the stark realization that confronting the past might require more than he was prepared to offer. As the day waned, the weight of his growing self-awareness pressed heavily on Hank. Questions surged within him, a tidal wave of uncertainty. Was he truly prepared to face the skeletons hidden within his family's closet? More importantly, what did personal growth demand of him? The vibrant colors of sunset washed over the landscape, but all Hank could see were the silhouettes of his fears standing tall before him. The moment of reckoning drifted closer, and he felt paralyzed on the cusp of change, suspended between the comfort of ignorance and the anxiety of enlightenment. Suddenly, the forest fell silent, and all he could hear was the frantic beating of his heart. With only the deepening shadows to accompany him, the stakes felt incalculably high. This was not merely an exploration, it was an impending confrontation. He turned to Jim, voice steady yet quaking. "What happens if I uncover something I'm not ready for?" Jim's response was a gentle challenge. "Then you gather the courage to weave it into your own story." With those words hanging in the air, Hank understood he stood at a critical juncture. The path ahead curved sharply, and stepping forward meant embracing the unknown. What lay beyond this threshold? Would the truths transform him into someone capable of rewriting his narrative, or would they unravel him entirely? The evening light waned, shadows creeping into the corners of his mind as Hank wrestled with his impending decisions. The call to action had never been so loud, so right, yet so steeped in uncertainty. He inhaled deeply, letting the cool evening air fill his lungs, knowing that the next day would bring him face to face with the truths that could cost him everything, or perhaps grant him a deeper understanding of who he truly was. As dawn broke again, Hank's internal landscape was not yet clear. The forest pulsed with the sounds of morning, but inside him thrummed a symphony of unease. Each bird call and rustle of leaves felt like a nudge toward a precipice, the edge of revelations beckoning him. Today, he resolved he would embrace the messages from Jim, the call to shed the layers of his past, to confront his fears. He found Jim waiting after breakfast, his demeanor calm, yet his eyes sparkled with anticipation, as if he already understood the battle that lay ahead for Hank. "You ready to dig into the tough stuff?" he prodded with an encouraging smile. Hank's heart raced. "As ready as I'll ever be," he stammered, though uncertainty gnawed at him. They ventured deeper into the woods, the sunlight filtering through the trees, illuminating their path. "Let's start with what you've been holding on to," Jim suggested, his tone inviting yet probing. "What's the first thing that comes to mind?" Hank hesitated. The shadows hung thick around him, a quiet reminder of the weight he carried. "I've always tied down," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Family expectations, the fear of failing them, it's like an anchor." "Then it's time to learn how to cut that anchor," Jim encouraged. "Survivors are those who know when to let go." The straightforwardness of those words pierced through the fog of doubt. With the forest as their backdrop, Jim guided Hank through practical survival tasks, each layered with deeper meaning. They practiced building a makeshift shelter. Each stick, carefully placed, represented a decision, a moment of clarity as Hank visualized the walls he'd built around his past. "Remember, a shelter isn't just physical," Jim instructed. "It's also mental and emotional. What you build to protect yourself is often the lesson you need to learn." Hank pondered this, feeling a part of him begin to unravel as he recognized how his own defenses had been shielding not only from pain, but also from growth. As the sunlight shifted, Jim shifted the focus toward navigation. "Do you see those rocks over there?" he asked, pointing to a cluster beyond the clearing. "Let's navigate to them using the sun. This is about more than just getting from point A to B, Hank. It's about recognizing the signs, trusting your instincts, two things you need to reclaim your story." Hank focused intently on the position of the sun, the angle of the shifting shadows. As they walked, the conversation turned to family stories, Jim guiding Hank to share his own. "I never felt like I belonged," Hank confessed, feeling the words spill out of him. "My family, they expect so much, but what if I don't measure up? That's a fear many feel, but what if you redefine what measuring up means?" Jim countered, his eyes locked on Hank's. "What if you found your own path instead of following in someone else's footsteps?" The challenge resonated deeply, stirring something dormant within him. Hank was beginning to question the narratives carved for him, growing into the realization that he had the power to rewrite them. They paused by a small stream, the water gliding over stones, a sound that soothed yet invigorated Hank. This was the moment that shifted something in him, a quiet understanding that survival wasn't simply a fight against the elements, but also a fight against the confines of his own mind. "Every lesson here," Jim said as they sat, "is an invitation to explore more deeply. Confront those fears, write your own tales of resilience." As Hank absorbed Jim's words, the tumult within him began to quiet, replaced by an inner determination that had long been dormant. His heart raced in a different way now, not out of fear, but from the thrill of potential. What had once felt like burdens became stepping stones towards discovering his inner strength. But just as hope started to swell in him, a distant sound, a rustle from the underbrush, gripped him with a sudden tension. It rattled him, an unwelcome reminder that not all survival encounters were predictably safe. He shot a glance at Jim, who was now alert, scanning the tree line. "What if that's a threat?" Hank mused, the doubts creeping back. "Then we face it together," Jim replied resolutely. "This is your journey. Trust what you've learned so far." Would Hank be able to stand firm amid unexpected challenges, or would this new uncertainty unravel the resolve he had just begun to forge? As they prepared to confront the unknown, a question weighed heavily on Hank's mind. What could emerge from the depths of his own fears? The rustle from the underbrush morphed into a cacophony of primal instincts. Hank felt his heart pound, not just from fear, but from an inexplicable urgency. This was it, the moment where he could either turn back towards safety or confront the unknown head-on. Behind him, he sensed Jim's quiet confidence, a solid anchor amidst the tempest of emotion surging through him. "What do we do now?" Hank asked, his voice barely escaping his lips. Jim remained still for a moment, tuning in to the sounds around them. "We'll move slowly and observe. Fear often clouds judgment. This is your chance to clear that fog." Hank felt an initial jolt of frustration ripple through him. Why should he, the one standing on the precipice of revelation, be paralyzed by fear of a mere sound? As he began to breathe deeper, the chaos in his mind transformed. His uncertainty shifted to focus, and he found the tenacious grip of resolve tightening around his core. "Okay, let's approach," Hank decided, fueled by a rush of adrenaline. Underbrush was thick, but with careful steps informed by Jim's earlier wisdom about instincts, he advanced slowly alongside his guide. Each rustle that had once seemed ominous now sounded merely curious, an echo of his own pulse in rhythm with nature. "What are you here?" Jim asked, bringing Hank back to the present before they encroached fully on the source of the noise. "Just the foliage moving. An animal, perhaps?" Hank's observations weren't definitive, but the more he concentrated, the more clarity emerged. "Exactly. Nature is unpredictable, just as your journey is. Every decision you make now is a choice, a reflection of what you're learning about yourself," Jim replied, and the gravity of that struck Hank. Each step was laden with significance. Eventually, they emerged into a small clearing, quiet but tense, and the pair spotted the source of the commotion moments later. A shy deer, startled, darted away into the thicket, vanishing just as quickly as it had appeared. A laugh escaped Hank, the kind of laugh that felt like an exhale after holding one's breath for far too long. Just a deer? Just a deer, Jim confirmed, a smile slowly across his face. And yet, think about how every fear can morph into something innocuous if we only confront it. You didn't let your fear dictate your actions. The revelation triggered a crack in the dam holding back Hank's feelings. Here in the wilderness, realization cascaded. He had navigated toward his source of tension, face to face with an unknown, and emerged unscathed. "I faced it," he whispered, a newfound strength radiating through him. "But what do I do with that?" "What do you want to do with that?" Jim countered, his eyes glinting with an encouraging spark. Hank considered the question, thoughts whirling into expansive possibilities. If every fear holds the potential for growth, then maybe I can start reframing those family expectations. They don't have to be my anchor. Exactly. Each moment is a choice, to grow, to stay, or to move on. You're on the cusp of rewriting your narrative, Hank. Gradually, Hank felt as though he was assembling the pieces of himself. The fragments fractured by doubt and expectation could now coalesce into something powerful. This experience became more than mere survival. It was an awakening. As they walked away from the clearing, a clear intention settled in Hank's mind. He would reclaim his agency in his own story, a journey of survival beckoning that extended beyond the depths of the physical wilderness. But just as clarity began to envelop him, the distant sound returned, a rumble akin to thunder resonating through the forest. It wasn't the wind this time. It felt like something much larger, breaching the horizon of their tranquil surroundings. He turned urgently to Jim. "What was that?" Jim's expression shifted, acknowledgement of a new urgency. "Whatever it is, it's real. We need to assess and prepare. Are you ready?" The moment of truth had arrived. Hank's newfound determination was about to be tested. A way he hadn't anticipated. Would he navigate this unexpected challenge, or would everything he'd just begun to understand crumble under pressure? What awaited them in the unknown ahead? The ground trembled slightly beneath Hank's feet, a visceral reminder of the potential chaos ahead. This wasn't just a test of courage, it was the leap into a reality he had long shied away from. "Ready?" he echoed Jim's question, though in this moment it felt more like a plea for reassurance than a declaration of fearlessness. As they moved cautiously toward the edge of the clearing, instinct kicked in. Hank's senses sharpened, the air thick with anticipation. Jim's steady presence loomed beside him, and for a fleeting moment he felt grounded. It was a stark contrast to the deluge of anxiety threatening to swell. "What do you think it is?" Hank asked, scanning the tree line for clues. He could feel curiosity wrestling with apprehension within him. Could be wildlife coming out for a meal, or it might be something bigger, a storm rolling in. "Every unknown challenges our understanding of what we perceive as safe," Jim said, his voice calm and unwavering. Hank absorbed these words, recognizing that the path to growth lay within these uncertainties. The situation was multifaceted. Fear existed as an emotional response to the unknown, but it was also a chance to adapt and learn, to advocate for the life he wished to create. "Let's get a vantage point," Jim suggested. Hank nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. Scaling a nearby fallen tree, he clambered up carefully, testing the boundaries of his physical capabilities. Each branch underfoot brought a mix of exhilaration and fear, an echo of his internal struggle to push past perceived limitations. From atop the log, he surveyed the surroundings. A formation of dark clouds loomed on the horizon, threatening rain. But it was not just the weather he sensed. There was something more, a subtle shift in the dynamics of the woods. "Look there," he pointed, narrowing his eyes to follow the shapes flitting through a thick cluster of trees. "Animals are moving in the opposite direction." Jim clambered up beside him, nodding thoughtfully. That's a sign. Something is compelling them to flee. Hank recognized the rhythm of instinct, both in himself and in nature. The urgency stirred a latent determination. He realized now that every step forward, every confrontation with the unknown, forged his path into the future he envisioned. Not just confronting fears, but stoking the flames of courage to engage fully with his agency. "What do we do?" Hank asked, his voice steady now. There was no room for hesitation. The moment demanded clarity of thought and action. "We find out what we're up against," Jim replied. "But we'll do it smart. We'll gather more information, assess, and then decide if we need to move or hold our ground." With his heart thumping in excitement alongside the remnants of fear, Hank clambered down the log, a newfound clarity casting away doubts. This was more than survival. It was about asserting his presence in the world, stepping beyond the confines of what others expected of him. As they moved deliberately toward the sounds, Hank felt a sense of empowerment setting in. This confrontation wasn't just about surviving in the wilderness. It was a metaphor for his life. Each decision cut through the fog of indecision that had shrouded him for so long. But the turmoil stirred by the rumbling echoed far deeper than mere physical fear. There was power in such moments, transitional, disruptive power that demanded a response. What revelation awaited them at this juncture? As they advanced, the ethereal tension hung heavy, and Hank was ready to confront the unseen forces of both nature and himself. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he declared firmly, emboldened. "Exactly," Jim agreed. "And once we do, be prepared for whatever follows. This is just the beginning of a greater challenge." As they drew closer, shadows and sounds merged into foreboding silhouettes. Hank's grip tightened around the makeshift weapon he had picked up earlier. There was no turning back now. The next decision could change everything. Would it illuminate the path ahead or push him further into the depths of uncertainty? With that thought, they stepped into the unfolding drama, the moment poised for revelation. The underbrush crackled as Hank and Jim moved cautiously forward, each step a calculated dance between anticipation and wariness. The shadows stretched ominously, and although Hank's heart raced, he was no longer paralyzed by the uncertainty. Instead, he felt buoyed by an awakening sense of purpose. Each rustle in the leaves fed his determination, proving that he wasn't merely at the mercy of nature. He had the tools to decipher its mysteries. Hank couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. They were not just observers in the wilderness. They were participants in an unfolding narrative that demanded their engagement. A chill prickled his skin as the wind picked up, carrying whispers that felt as if nature itself was urging him to confront what lingered beneath the surface of his experience. "What do you think is pushing them away?" Hank asked, his voice steady and assertive. The urge to delve deeper into the unknown ignited a flame within him. Jim squinted into the thickening darkness, gauging the strata of sound and movement. "There could be a predator, or something else, but it doesn't matter right now. We need to be prepared for anything." Hank internalized Jim's words, realizing the wisdom in them. Preparation was empowerment. He scanned the terrain, considering their options. With the world shifting fluidly around him and reality closing in, perhaps vulnerability lay not in the unknown, but rather in his unwillingness to confront it. Using his surroundings, Hank grounded himself in the present moment. Recognizing the patterns of the shadows, he contemplated the lessons the wilderness could teach him. The animals were sounding the alarm, responding with instinct and urgency, and Hank realized he, too, had instincts that demanded acknowledgement. "Let's spread out a bit," Hank suggested, feeling a sudden surge of confidence coursing through him. "If we cover more ground, we might uncover what's out there more quickly." Good idea, Jim nodded, approval lighting up his features. For Hank, it was as if the weight of hesitation had lifted. He was stepping boldly into a role he had long shied away from, the assertive navigator of his fate. They moved parallel to each other, eyes and ears attuned to the shifting landscape. The experience was exhilarating. Hank felt a rush similar to the thrill of racing through the streets of his hometown, but this time it was layered with a sense of purpose. Each crack of a twig beneath his boots signified not just mindful movement, but a reminder of the power resting within him. As they crested a small rise, a sudden cacophony erupted from the woods beyond, a desperate crescendo of rustling leaves and animal calls. Hank's stomach tightened. This wasn't mere instinct, but a full body alert demanding his attention. "Stay low and listen," Jim hissed, dropping into a crouch. Hank followed suit, tension rippling through his muscles. They both focused intensely on deciphering the sound. There was a distinct rustle, and then silence, heavy and ominous. What had silenced the forest? His mind raced, and for a fleeting moment, doubt flickered. Was he equipped for this? But then he remembered the decision to step forward, to embrace the unknown. That commitment rose within him as a solid affirmation, solidifying his resolve. Suddenly, a low growl rippled through the air, sending a tremor down Hank's spine. The two men froze, the primitive response screaming for action, born from the instinctual need to survive. There was no longer time for second-guessing. The encounter they'd prepared for had arrived. "Get ready," Jim mouthed, his eyes fixed ominously ahead. Now was the time to draw upon their gathered knowledge, to summon the skills they practiced in abstract, and confront the reality of their situation. Hank straightened, adrenaline surging through his veins. He wasn't just a participant anymore. He was a critical actor in this narrative. Unbeknownst to him, the confrontation would not only test his survival skills, but challenge the very essence of who he was and who he aspired to become. Breathing deep, he tightened his grip on the weapon, a testament to his growth. Just as they prepared to confront the source of the sound, the underbrush erupted, revealing not just what lay ahead, but the essence of Hank's transformation waiting to emerge. What stark truths would this encounter unveil about his identity and purpose? Hank's heart thundered in his chest as the underbrush erupted, the primal echo of the growl reverberating through the air. Adrenaline coursed through him, sharp and electric, sharpening his senses. He wasn't just confronting the unknown. He was standing on the precipice of a revelation about himself that had long been buried beneath layers of self-doubt. His instincts flared, and he caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows about 10 feet away. It was clumsy and low to the ground, but the sheer power emanating from it was undeniable. Hank's mind raced. He needed clarity amidst the chaos. What would his grandfather do, he thought, recalling stories of survival passed down through his family. Hank's grandfather had faced endless obstacles with resilience, turning danger into opportunity time and again. "Jim," he whispered, barely moving his lips, "we need to use the terrain." It was part strategy, part instinct, and Hank felt a sense of pride in his ability to piece together his surroundings in the face of uncertainty. Utilizing his knowledge of both the wilderness and his own capacity to lead, he dared to hope they could outmaneuver whatever had set the forest on edge. "Jim," he nodded, still crouched low, his dim outline almost blending into the darkening forest floor. Hank gestured for them to circle around, moving deeper into the thicket. The anticipation pulsed in every inch of him as they shifted away from the direct confrontation. This was about more than survival. It was about reclaiming the heart of who he was, a reflection of every story of bravery he had ever clung to, now realized in action. As they quietly maneuvered through the foliage, Hank felt the weight of his past decisions pressing against him. He had spent too long trying to fit into roles that didn't suit him. Now, each deliberate movement was an assertion of his newfound identity. A shift of branches drew their attention back to the source of the growl, which was cloaked in shadow. Hank steadied his breathing, consciously adjusting his grip on the weapon as his gaze zeroed in on the beast. It was larger than he had anticipated, its muscle rippling beneath skin that glistened in the dappled light. But fear began to morph into something else, understanding. He noticed the creature's stance, a tension in its muscles that mirrored his own. It was a reminder that they were both caught in this intricate web of life and survival. And though they stood on opposite sides, it didn't preclude the possibility of respect. The wilderness had taught him many lessons. Now was the time to understand this one deeply. "Stay quiet," Hank murmured to Jim, his thoughts racing with strategy. What did the moment offer other than confrontation? Perhaps it was a glimpse into the raw, untamed nature of possibility. With a deliberate breath, he began to approach, aware that retreating would only reinforce his past hesitations. The breath of the creature had slowed, curiosity seeping into the growl. Hank's pulse quickened as he recognized his growing determination. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was engaged, a participant in this deep, visceral narrative between life and death. Suddenly, a snap of a twig underfoot drew all attention back to him. The creature pivoted, eyes locking onto Hank's with an intensity that shook him to his core. Was this fear? Courage? The boundaries blurred as he confronted the realization that within him lay the capacity to lead, to understand not just the wilderness, but also himself. "Trust yourself," he whispered to himself, channeling the emerging strength he had discovered in this very instinct. What lay ahead was more than a mere physical confrontation. It was a crucible for his spirit and resolve. The moment had come not only to face the creature, but to confront his very identity, a landmark in his evolution. The growl faded to a near silence, replaced by a question hanging in the air, daring Hank to move. Would he retreat to the shadow of his old self, or face the challenge with the strength he was beginning to recognize? And just as Hank felt that tension peak, he realized the next decision, the intersection of courage and vulnerability, could ripple far beyond this encounter. What would he choose when the moment of truth arrived? In the charged stillness of the forest, Hank stood rooted, eyes locked with the creature's. The weight of the moment settled heavily on him. It was a culmination of every hesitation, doubt, and fear he had ever faced. Jim's steady presence beside him both comforted and propelled him forward. With an unwavering resolve, Hank took a breath that steadied his racing heart. This was not merely a standoff. It was a defining moment. The wilderness had challenged him at every turn, but today he was ready to confront not only the beast before him, but also the demons of his past. As he lowered his makeshift weapon, he felt an ember of courage ignite within. This was about survival, not just of the body, but of the spirit. The creature paused, tilting its head, sensing the shift in energy. Hank recognized a kind of kinship in that gaze, a mirror of his own struggle to navigate through fear and uncertainty. Was it possible that the respect he'd yearned for from his family, the validation of his sense of self, could be found in an understanding of this wild creature? In that split second, clarity washed over him, a revelation that transcended the immediate threat. "Jim, I think it's scared," Hank admitted, surprising himself with the insight. A part of him had always viewed his abilities through the lens of survival, but in this moment, empathy supplanted fear, and his role morphed into that of a protector rather than an aggressor. "Trust your instincts," Jim encouraged, his eyes shimmering in the low light, acknowledging Hank's shifting paradigm. "You've gained your skills through resilience and understanding." Hank stepped forward, lowering himself, mimicking the creature's cautious demeanor. "Observe," he whispered to Jim. Their prior lessons surged back. Survival wasn't just about physical prowess. It also required compassion and insight. As he extended a hand, open and vulnerable, the air between them shifted again, their fates intertwined. Just then, the clouds above darkened, threatening a storm. Instead of shying away, Hank felt a release from the prior tension, as the impending rain symbolized renewal, a cleansing of past burdens. With that storm, he could create his own narrative, reclaiming the essence of true survival. He could see it. Families weathering storms together, not bound by the choice of legacy, but thriving in truth, in shared experiences. The thought invigorated him, and he wasn't afraid anymore. He had already begun crafting a tale that would echo beyond the forest. The growl morphed into a soft huff, punctuated by a light rustle as the creature turned its gaze away, retreating into the thicket. Hank's breath released in tandem with the creature's descent into the trees. It was an exchange of understanding, a promise of harmony rather than fear. The moment felt monumental, the air crackling with the energy of choice. Hank had confronted legacy, fear, and the unknown, and emerged stronger. He turned to Jim, who wore a proud smile that reflected what Hank himself had begun to realize. He could forge his path, redefine success, and embrace everything he had learned. As they departed the clearing, the rain began to patter softly, awakening the earth beneath them. The confrontation had carved a path for Hank, not only into the depths of the forest, but also into the realm of his own identity. With each step, he felt the roots of his inheritance shift from an anchor into a launching pad. The skills he had honed were no longer mere tools for survival. They had unlocked a deeper wisdom. Weeks turned into months as Hank reestablished his life, but this time entwined within the community he chose, echoing the spirit of adventure he had longed for. He mobilized the very tools of his craft, serving as a mentor to others, guiding them through the tumultuous terrain of inner and outer wilderness. He became the spark of their narratives, just as Jim had been for him. Recognition came flowing in, awards for his community initiatives, honors for his role in conservation efforts, yet none of it felt like burden or obligation. The accolades celebrated his authenticity, his commitment to a life carved by experience, grounded in truth. When Hank reflected on that pivotal moment in the clearing, surrounded by whispers of the forest, he could hardly believe how far he had come. He had not only rewritten his narrative, but reclaimed a legacy forged by free will rather than intimidation. His heart brimmed with pride as he acknowledged the journey he had undertaken. A testament that showed resilience was not simply about survival. It was about thriving and embracing the stories that shaped him. As he inspired others to do the same, Hank stood confident, recognized for his competence and reverence for truth, now firmly rooted in a newfound purpose, a legend in his own right. Now, dear follower, it's your turn to seize your story. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Hank's journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformation. Make your voice heard. You need to show your support now. Don't wait even one more second to share.